Famous face, familiar story, right? Not quite. Beneath the fame are the untold details, the strange facts, the moments you never saw coming. It's time to look a little closer, sit back, relax, and let's dive into the unexpected.
Nikola Tesla's mind was famously brilliant, but it was also shaped by quirks and aversions that baffled those around him. One of the strangest of these was his intense, almost visceral fear of pearls. This wasn't a mild dislike. Tesla reportedly would refuse to speak to women who wore them, no matter how important the meeting or how pressing the occasion. Even his longtime secretary once came to work wearing a pearl necklace, and Tesla promptly sent her home for the day. He later explained that he couldn't bear to look at them without feeling a wave of disgust and discomfort. The origin of Tesla's aversion is something of a mystery. There is no documented traumatic incident involving pearls, and he never gave a scientific reason for it. Some biographers have speculated that the irregular surface and lustrous sheen of pearls triggered a sensory reaction in Tesla, who was known to have heightened sensitivities. He disliked touching hair, avoided most forms of physical contact, and was repelled by certain textures and repetitive patterns. Pearls, with their uneven spherical forms and almost biological appearance, may have activated the same deep-seated discomfort. This aversion fit into a broader pattern of obsessive-compulsive behaviors that colored Tesla's life. He was meticulous to the point of compulsion, counting steps as he walked, insisting on doing things in multiples of 3, and avoiding contact with dust or dirt. Pearls may simply have represented one more sensory irritant in a world where Tesla's mind was too busy and his senses too sharp. While his fear of pearls seems like an odd footnote in the life of one of history's greatest inventors, it's also a reminder that genius often comes bundled with eccentricities that are as memorable as the work itself.
In 2013, music legend Tina Turner made headlines when she officially renounced her US citizenship and became a Swiss citizen. Turner had been living in Switzerland since the mid-1990s, having moved there to be with her longtime partner, German music executive Erwin Bach. The couple settled in the Zurich suburb of Küsnacht, where Turner found not only privacy and peace, but also a deep appreciation for Swiss culture and way of life. She once remarked that Switzerland felt like home in a way America never truly had, and that she felt more accepted and at ease there. Her decision to become a Swiss citizen was not impulsive. Turner had been living in the country for nearly 2 decades before applying for naturalization. Swiss law requires applicants to demonstrate integration into the community, including proficiency in one of the national languages. Turner passed the process, received her Swiss passport, and shortly afterward formally gave up her American citizenship at the US Embassy in Bern. The move symbolized a complete personal and professional shift. She had already retired from performing in 2009, choosing a quieter life away from the constant demands of fame. For Turner, the decision reflected both love and lifestyle. She married Erwin Bach in Switzerland that same year, deepening her ties to her adopted country. In interviews, she expressed gratitude for the stability, safety, and privacy she enjoyed there, luxuries that had often been hard to come by during her turbulent earlier life. By the time of her passing in 2023, Tina Turner was firmly rooted in Switzerland, remembered not just as an American-born icon of rock and soul, but also as someone who fully embraced a new homeland and identity in her later years.
Freddie Mercury, the iconic lead singer of the rock band Queen, was born Farrokh Bulsara on September 5, 1946, in Zanzibar. One of the most distinctive aspects of his physical appearance was his teeth, specifically a condition known as mesiodens, which resulted in 4 extra incisors in his upper jaw. This gave him a prominent overbite, often referred to as malocclusion, which became a recognizable feature of his persona. Mercury was self-conscious about his teeth and reportedly avoided smiling broadly in photographs or on stage to minimize attention to them. Despite this, he chose not to undergo corrective dental surgery, a decision influenced by both practical and artistic considerations. The extra teeth pushed his front teeth forward, creating a pronounced overbite that some speculated contributed to his unique vocal abilities, though this claim has been debated by experts. Mercury believed that his dental anomaly played a significant role in his extraordinary vocal range, which spanned approximately 4 octaves. He attributed his powerful voice and ability to hit high notes to the extra space in his mouth caused by the additional teeth. This belief was rooted in the idea that the shape and size of his oral cavity enhanced his vocal resonance and projection. While there is no definitive scientific evidence to confirm that his extra teeth directly improved his singing, the structure of his mouth likely influenced the timbre and resonance of his voice. Singers often rely on the unique anatomy of their vocal tract, throat, mouth, and nasal passages, to produce distinctive sounds, and Mercury's overbite may have contributed to the fullness and clarity of his tone, which captivated audiences worldwide. Dental professionals and vocal coaches have mixed opinions on whether Mercury's extra teeth were a significant factor in his vocal prowess. Some experts suggest that the extra teeth could have altered the shape of his palate, potentially creating a larger resonating chamber that amplified his voice's power and range. Others argue that his vocal talent was more a result of natural ability, rigorous practice, and exceptional breath control, rather than his dental structure. Mercury's reluctance to fix his teeth stemmed partly from his fear that altering them might change his voice, a risk he was unwilling to take given his success as a performer. His overbite became an endearing trait, embraced by fans as part of his charismatic stage presence, and he never let his self-consciousness hinder his electrifying performances. Beyond the physical impact, Mercury's extra teeth became a cultural footnote in his larger-than-life legacy. He openly acknowledged them in interviews, often with humor, and they added to his unique persona as a flamboyant yet relatable figure. The decision to keep his teeth as they were reflected his confidence in his artistry and his willingness to embrace his imperfections. This choice resonated with fans, who admired his authenticity and vulnerability. Mercury's belief in the connection between his teeth and his voice remains a fascinating aspect of his story, blending myth with reality, and it underscores the mystique of one of rock music's greatest voices, whose performances continue to inspire decades after his passing on November 24, 1991.
Before Katy Perry was the global superstar behind hits like Firework and Roar, she was a teenager chasing a very different dream, one rooted in church stages rather than pop arenas. Born Catherine Elizabeth Hudson, she grew up in a strict Pentecostal household, with both of her parents working as pastors. Secular music was largely off-limits, and much of her early musical influence came from singing in her parents' church. At just 16 years old, she signed to a small Christian record label called Red Hill Records and released a self-titled gospel rock album, Katy Hudson, in 2001. The songs were deeply rooted in faith, touching on themes of devotion, belief, and spiritual guidance. Despite her enthusiasm, the album never reached a wide audience. It reportedly sold fewer than 200 copies before the label shut down. Perry later said she poured her heart into the project, but the industry wasn't ready for a teenage gospel artist without major backing. The failure of Katy Hudson was a turning point. Determined not to give up, she reinvented herself, literally changing her stage name to Katy Perry, using her mother's maiden name to avoid confusion with actress Kate Hudson. She left the gospel world behind and began experimenting with pop and rock sounds, drawing inspiration from Alanis Morissette, Gwen Stefani, and Queen. Her big break came in 2008 with the provocative I Kissed a Girl, which couldn't have been more different from her gospel beginnings. What makes this part of her story so hard to believe is how completely she transformed her image, sound, and career path. Many fans who sing along to Teenage Dream or Dark Horse have no idea that the woman behind those hits once performed in modest dresses, sang worship ballads, and toured Christian youth festivals. Even today, original copies of Katy Hudson are rare collector's items, often selling for hundreds of dollars online. A hidden relic from a chapter of Perry's career that feels almost like it belonged to someone else entirely.
In June 1999, best-selling author Stephen King's life took a sudden and near-fatal turn when he was struck by a van while walking along a rural road in Lovell, Maine. The vehicle, driven by a man named Brian Smith, veered off the road and slammed into King at about 50 miles per hour. The accident left the author with severe injuries, multiple broken bones, a collapsed lung, and deep cuts requiring hours of surgery and a long, painful recovery. King later recalled that he was lucky to be alive, as doctors told him the accident could easily have killed him outright. The details surrounding the van itself became an unusual epilogue to the accident. The Dodge Caravan that hit King was eventually put up for auction, after being deemed unfit for the road. Fearing that it would end up as a grotesque collector's item or be displayed morbidly as a Stephen King artifact, King's lawyer bought the vehicle on the author's behalf for $1,500, 0 cents. King didn't keep it as a personal memento. Instead, the van was reportedly destroyed in a junkyard, crushed so it could never become a morbid souvenir. The accident had a profound effect on King's career and personal life. His injuries caused lasting pain and limited his ability to sit and write for long periods, leading him to consider retirement. Although he ultimately continued producing novels, the event deeply influenced his work, with themes of mortality, survival, and sudden catastrophe becoming even more pronounced in his later books. The story of King being hit and then purchasing and destroying the very van that almost killed him remains one of the more bizarre and symbolic episodes in the life of a man who has built his career exploring the strange and unsettling.
When Stephen Hawking was first diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, in 1963, doctors gave him a life expectancy of just 2 years. He was only 21 at the time, a brilliant Cambridge University graduate student who had just begun to make his mark in the field of theoretical physics. ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder that affects nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord, gradually leading to muscle weakness, paralysis, and in most cases, death within a few years. The news was devastating, and Hawking fell into a period of deep depression, convinced he would not live long enough to finish his doctoral work. Against all odds, however, Hawking defied the grim prognosis in a way that astonished both the medical and scientific communities. Instead of deteriorating rapidly, his disease progressed much more slowly than typical ALS cases. Over the decades, he lost the use of most of his muscles, became wheelchair-bound, and eventually required a computer-based speech system to communicate, yet his mind remained as sharp as ever. For more than 50 years after his diagnosis, he continued to work, teach, travel, and contribute groundbreaking ideas to cosmology and physics, particularly in the study of black holes and the origins of the universe. Hawking himself often acknowledged the strange irony of his condition. While ALS took away nearly all of his physical abilities, it forced him to focus entirely on intellectual pursuits, which may have helped fuel his unparalleled scientific career. He became a global icon of resilience, proving that physical limitations did not have to dictate one's ability to impact the world. Living until 2018, Hawking survived 55 years after being told he had only 2. A medical mystery that baffled doctors and remains largely unexplained, though researchers believe he may have had a rare, slow-progressing form of the disease. His extraordinary longevity turned what could have been a short, tragic life into one of the most inspiring stories in modern science.
The story that George Washington had wooden teeth is one of the most persistent myths in American history, but it's only partially true, and actually, mostly false. Washington did suffer from notoriously bad dental health for most of his life, losing his first adult tooth in his 20s and eventually ending up with only one natural tooth by the time he became president. His dental issues were so severe that he relied on multiple sets of dentures over the years, but none of them were made of wood. In reality, Washington's dentures were crafted from a combination of materials that included human teeth, some purchased, possibly from enslaved people, ivory from hippopotamuses and elephants, gold, and lead. These materials were shaped and fitted into denture plates, which were uncomfortable, stained easily, and could give the appearance of dark, grainy wood, perhaps fueling the origin of the wooden teeth legend. The ivory in particular would discolor over time, taking on a brownish tint that may have reinforced the false idea that they were made of wood. Despite the advanced craftsmanship for the time, Washington's dentures were far from perfect. They caused him constant discomfort and altered the shape of his face, contributing to the tight-lipped expression seen in many of his portraits. He was extremely self-conscious about his teeth, often avoiding public speaking when possible, and even during his inauguration, he was reportedly in significant dental pain. The truth about his dental history is more complex and more uncomfortable than the simple wooden teeth story. but it's also a fascinating glimpse into the realities of 18th century medicine and the private struggles of America's first president.
Mahatma Gandhi, one of the most iconic figures in the history of nonviolent resistance, was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize on 5 separate occasions, but never received the award. His nominations came in 1937, 1938, 1939, 1947, and posthumously in 1948, following his assassination. Gandhi's philosophy of ahimsa, non-violence, and his leadership in India's struggle for independence made him an international symbol of peace and moral courage. However, despite the global admiration he attracted, the Nobel Committee consistently passed him over. The reasons behind his repeated snubs are still debated today. In the earlier years, some members of the Nobel Committee viewed Gandhi's political activism as too closely tied to nationalist movements, which they believed conflicted with the purely humanitarian or peace-focused criteria for the award at that time. During World War II, geopolitical tensions and Norway's relationship with Britain also influenced decisions. Awarding Gandhi could have been seen as politically provocative. When Gandhi was assassinated in January 1948, he was once again under serious consideration for the prize. The committee ultimately decided not to award the Peace Prize to anyone that year, stating that there was no suitable living candidate. In later years, members of the Nobel Committee openly admitted that failing to honor Gandhi was one of the greatest oversights in the prize's history. In fact, when the 1989 Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to the Dalai Lama, the committee publicly acknowledged that the decision was, in part, a tribute to Gandhi's legacy. Gandhi's absence from the Nobel laureate list remains one of the most striking contradictions in the award's history, a reminder that even the most revered moral leaders can be overlooked due to politics, timing, and the complexities of global opinion.
Julia Child, born Julia Carolyn McWilliams in 1912 in Pasadena, California, is celebrated for her influence on American cooking, but she also served as an intelligence officer during World War II. Eager to contribute to the war effort after the U.S. entered the conflict, she joined the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, in 1942, unable to enlist in the military due to her 6'2" height. Starting as a typist in Washington, D.C., she handled classified documents and quickly rose to a junior research assistant role in the Secret Intelligence Branch. Her knack for organization and sharp intellect allowed her to manage sensitive information vital to wartime operations, marking the start of her unexpected espionage career. In one of her more intriguing assignments, Child worked on a project to develop a shark repellent for the OSS. The Navy needed a solution to prevent sharks from accidentally setting off underwater explosives meant for enemy targets. Collaborating with scientists, she helped create a mixture of copper acetate and black dye that mimicked the smell of decayed shark meat, deterring sharks effectively for several hours. This early foray into problem solving, which she later jokingly called her first recipe, showcased her ability to tackle unconventional challenges with practical solutions, a skill that would later define her culinary innovations. From 1944 to 1945, Child was stationed overseas in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, and Kunming, China, serving as chief of the OSS registry. With top security clearance, she managed all incoming and outgoing classified messages, including plans for operations like the invasion of the Malay Peninsula. It was during this period that she met Paul Child, an OSS officer who later became her husband and sparked her love for French cuisine. Her work in China earned her a Civilian Service Award, recognizing her efficiency and dedication in high-pressure environments that demanded precision and discretion. After the war, Child left the OSS in 1945 and moved to Paris with Paul in 1948, where she trained at Le Cordon Bleu and began her culinary career. Her time as a spy, though not filled with cloak and dagger missions, honed her ability to handle complex tasks and adapt to new challenges, qualities that shone through in her meticulous recipes and engaging television presence. Her intelligence work remained largely unknown during her lifetime, overshadowed by her fame as a chef, but it revealed a woman of remarkable versatility who served her country with the same passion she later brought to America's kitchens.
Brad Pitt, the acclaimed actor and producer, has a lesser-known story from his early days that sounds almost too wild to be true. He once worked as a costumed chicken mascot for an El Pollo Loco restaurant in Los Angeles. Before his rise to fame in films like Thelma and Louise and Fight Club, Pitt was a struggling actor in the 1980s, taking odd jobs to make ends meet while chasing auditions. Dressed in a bright yellow chicken suit, he stood on Hollywood sidewalks, waving at cars and handing out flyers to drum up business for the fast food chain. The image of a future heartthrob sweating under a feathered costume in the California heat, performing for tips and minimum wage, is a surreal contrast to his later glamorous persona, but it underscores his determination to break into the industry. Another hard-to-believe tale from Pitt's pre-fame life involves him moonlighting as a chauffeur for a limousine company that occasionally served less-than-savory clients. In one instance, he reportedly drove for a group of partygoers who turned out to be part of an underground fight club, not unlike the one he'd later portray in the iconic 1999 film. Pitt has hinted in interviews that these chaotic rides, filled with rowdy and sometimes shady characters, gave him a first-hand glimpse into the gritty subcultures of Los Angeles. The irony of him stumbling into a real-life scenario that mirrored one of his most famous roles feels like something out of a Hollywood script, yet it added to the eclectic experiences that shaped his early career. Pitt's adventurous streak also led him to an unusual encounter during the filming of Troy in 2004, where he played the Greek warrior Achilles. While shooting in Malta, he allegedly befriended a local fisherman who claimed to be a descendant of ancient Phoenician sailors. The fisherman invited Pitt to join him on a midnight boat trip to a hidden Mediterranean cove, where they dove for artifacts rumored to be from a sunken Phoenician ship. Pitt, ever the thrill-seeker, reportedly found a small bronze amulet in the sand, which he kept as a memento. The idea of a global superstar diving for ancient relics with a stranger under the cover of night sounds like a plot from an adventure film, but it aligns with Pitt's reputation for embracing spontaneous, offbeat experiences. Perhaps the most astonishing story involves Pitt's brief stint as an amateur storm chaser during a break from filming in the Midwest in the early 2000s. Fascinated by the raw power of nature after witnessing a tornado while working on a project, he joined a group of storm enthusiasts in Oklahoma for a week, driving through Tornado Alley in a beat-up van equipped with weather gear. Pitt reportedly got close enough to a forming funnel cloud to feel its wind, an experience he later described as both terrifying and exhilarating. While he never pursued storm chasing further, the notion of Brad Pitt, A-list celebrity, chasing twisters with a ragtag crew of weather nerds feels like a fever dream. Yet it reflects his curiosity and willingness to dive into the unexpected, even at the height of his fame.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed diving into the lesser-known side of these celebrities, but the story doesn't end here. Next up, we're pulling back the curtain on celebrities both past and present. You won't want to miss. Stay tuned.